On the evening of May the 10th, 1941, the Deputy Führer of Nazi Germany, Rudolf Hess, embarked on a solo flight that would baffle wartime leaders, mystify historians, and it remains one of the most bizarre episodes of the Second World War. Flying alone from Augsburg in southern Germany to Scotland in a modified Messerschmitt Bf 110, Hess parachuted into a Scottish field near Eaglesham, claiming he had come to negotiate peace between Britain and Germany. His journey was unauthorised, deeply irrational in military terms, and also shrouded in conspiracy. The story of Hess's flight is one of delusion, diplomacy, and psychological decline, and it has never really fully been entangled. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Rudolf Hess was born in 1894 in Alexandria, in Egypt, to a wealthy German merchant family. After service as a fighter pilot in World War I, he became one of Adolf Hitler's earliest and most devoted followers. Hess participated in the failed Beer Hall Putsch of 1923 and was imprisoned with Hitler at Landsberg, where he helped to transcribe Hitler's manifesto Mein Kampf. After the Nazi Party's rise to power in 1933, Hess was appointed Deputy Führer, a role that made him the third most powerful man in Germany after Hitler and Hermann Göring. Yet despite his lofty title, Hess was increasingly sidelined by the mid-1930s. Lacking the administrative ruthlessness of Heinrich Himmler or the political cunning of Joseph Goebbels, Hess was perceived as an idealist and someone of an oddity. His interest in astrology, homeopathy, and certain philosophies isolated him within the Nazi elite. By the time the Second World War had come round, his role was largely ceremonial. In the late afternoon of May 10, 1941, Rudolf Hess took off from an airfield in Augsburg. His destination was Scotland. His target, the Duke of Hamilton, a British aristocrat and member of the House of Lords. Hess believed that Hamilton, who had met Nazi officials before the war, might broker peace negotiations between Britain and Germany. Hess had apparently convinced himself that a faction within the British establishment was willing to make peace with Hitler, particularly to redirect Germany's military might towards the Soviet Union. Flying for nearly 1,000 miles, Hess evaded British radar with, let's face it, remarkable skill for a novice pilot and someone who hadn't flown in massive amounts since the First World War, though he was eventually spotted by RAF fighters. Nearing his destination, he ran low on fuel and bailed out over Eaglesham, south of Glasgow. Locals discovered him and turned him over to the Home Guard. Initially, he identified himself as Alfred Horn, but he soon revealed his true identity under interrogation. He was Rudolf Hess, Hitler's Deputy Führer, on a peace mission from the Third Reich. Hess's arrival stunned the British government. Prime Minister Winston Churchill was informed almost immediately, and security officials quickly took charge of the mysterious envoy. Churchill ordered Hess imprisoned and kept under very tight security. Now British authorities were deeply sceptical. Why would one of Hitler's top men abandon his post and risk his life in a solo flight to enemy territory without authorization? Was he mentally unwell? Was this an elaborate ruse by Hitler to drive a wedge between Britain and the Soviet Union? Now the British quickly concluded that Hess had acted without Hitler's knowledge. The Führer himself was reportedly enraged, declaring Hess mentally deranged. Nazi propaganda scrambled to explain the incident, describing Hess's flight as the work of a madman suffering from hallucinations and pacifist tendencies. Hess was officially stripped of all offices and removed from the Nazi hierarchy. His own writings and statements during British interrogation make clear that he believed he could broker peace between Germany and Britain. He was convinced, falsely, that there was influential British politicians, especially in aristocratic circles, who opposed the Second World War and who would prefer to negotiate with Germany if they were given the opportunity. The Duke of Hamilton, whom Hess referenced in these letters he carried, had indeed visited Germany before the war, but had shown no signs of political sympathy. Now, to explain Hess's flight, one of the most mysterious events of the Second World War, there are several theories that have emerged. The first was that Hess was on a delusional lone mission. Now, this is the mostly accepted theory, that Hess, increasingly sidelined and also mentally unstable, acted on his own misguided belief that he could prevent further war by flying to Britain with a peace proposal. There is a second theory, that a secret peace offer had been approved by Hitler. Some historians have speculated that Hitler knew of Hess's mission and sent him to test British willingness to negotiate peace before then launching Operation Barbarossa. However, this is largely unsupported by documentary evidence and contradicted by Hitler's own fury once he had discovered what Hess had done. The third theory is that it may have been British psychological warfare. Another theory does exist that British intelligence may have encouraged Hess through channels of misinformation, possibly using astrologers or intermediaries to act on his delusions, but that remains speculative. A fourth theory? Well, it's a failed attempt to split the Allies. In this version, Hess's mission was a last-ditch attempt to sow discord between Britain and the Soviet Union on the eve of Germany's invasion of the countries. If Britain had agreed to a separate peace, the German military would have been free to concentrate its efforts in the East. Now, after his arrest, Rudolf Hess was kept in various prisons and also mental institutions in Britain. He was even locked up inside the Tower of London. He was eventually transferred to Nuremberg for trial by the International Military Tribunal in 1945. During the proceedings, Hess claimed amnesia, but later admitted he had feigned memory loss to avoid testifying. He was convicted of crimes against peace and conspiracy to commit crimes against peace, but acquitted of war crimes and also crimes against humanity. Sentenced to life imprisonment, Rudolf Hess was sent to Spandau prison in Berlin, where he would remain for the rest of his life. He was the prison's last inmate after 1966 and lived in complete isolation under the joint supervision of the Allied powers. On August 17, 1987, at the age of 93, Rudolf Hess was found dead inside the Gardens summer house within the prison grounds. Officially, he had hanged, using an extension cord, though his advanced age and how he was frail raised immediate doubts. His family and some researchers argued he had been murdered to prevent the embarrassment of his potential release or to silence him permanently. In 1989, a British coroner's inquiry concluded that Hess had indeed taken his own life, but skeptics continued to raise questions about the access of guards, the nature of his wounds, and the presence of military personnel at the scene. Calls for new investigations were denied, but in 2011 his remains were exhumed, cremated, and scattered at sea to prevent neo-Nazi pilgrimages to his grave in Wunsiedel. Now, the flight of Rudolf Hess remains one of the most puzzling chapters of World War II, a solitary, bizarre mission that defied military logic and diplomatic protocol. Whether driven by delusion, desperation, or manipulation, Hess's actions had no tangible effect on the course of the war, but they did raise profound questions about the psychology of the Nazi leadership, the complex web of wartime diplomacy, and the power of individual madness on history. To this day, the full truth about Hess's motivations, his intended contacts in Britain, and the reaction within the Nazi high command remains not very clear. What is clear is that Hess's mission, whether peace overture or lunatic fantasy, was doomed from the start, and would seal his fate as one of the war's strangest and most tragic figures. But his flight, arguably, did save his life, as he would never be sentenced to death at Nuremberg because of it. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please click subscribe down below, and once again, thank you so much for watching.